telemedicine solution can help healthcare providers provide more convenient, real-time interactions with their patients while simultaneously relieving the scheduling pressure on his or her practice. The promise of telemedicine lies in its ability to become a true care delivery option or practice extension for managing patients, particularly seniors with chronic medical illnesses and behavioral health comorbidities. In today's upsurge in COVID-19 cases, many patients are now making use of telemedicine services. They're logging in with symptoms like headache, fever, sore throat, rashes for themselves or their kids. Treating them over the computer, tablet, or smartphone is undoubtedly more convenient than a costly trip to the ER or urgent care and keeps them away from the other sick people waiting there. Providing frontline care, monitoring patients, post-discharge, and delivery some aspects of behavioral health services. To elaborate on the various factors that can decide telemedicine's future as an innovative alternative care delivery model, we have Colonel Dr. Ashwini Goyal, sir, with us. He's the president of Telemedicine Society of India, Lucknow, delivering his session titled Telemedicine, Opportunities and Challenges. Our anchor for this session will be Dr. Rupashree MR. She's an assistant professor at the Symbiosis Institute of Health Sciences, Symbiosis International University, a qualified MBBS with a master's in diabetology. A little bit about Dr. Rupashree, an astute performer with more than 23 plus years of extensive experience in healthcare services and capacity to handle the entire hospital administration with the responsibility to maintain day-to-day administrative activities. She has exposure in handling healthcare administrative issues, and she's proficient in troubleshooting experience in medical management with clinical expertise. Her core competencies are in operations management, quality care, training and capacity building, IT in healthcare, business intelligence, and telehealth. Welcome, madam. I request you to kindly take over the session.
Thank you, Dr. Kazi, for this wonderful introduction. First of all, I would like to say knowledge is power. And more than that, applied knowledge is really powerful. Good morning to each and everyone. And we have a wonderful participants of 464, the highest which has been there for today. I would like to also say that in our particular area of telemedicine and telehealth, which is the need of the hour for both healthcare providers and also for the patients, this innovative and newer concepts have been very much fine-tuned for Indian perspective. Health consultation provided by a joint system of small, medium, and large hospitals are managed today with managerial strategies and also to include multi-speciality telemedicine and telehealth services for collaborating it from this main center to the peripheral units as such. Now, let me also tell you all and introduce Colonel Dr. Ashwini Goyal, sir. He has got a vast degrees, MBBS, MPhil, MBA, DPM, DNACA, HDSC, and DCS, a huge point which I really want to understand and learn. He is also a founder member and president of Telemedicine Society of India, TSI. He is an external assessor and also a senior consultant in quality assurance and quality improvement. And he's a technical advisor for automation of NQAS, then Lux certification of Government of India, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, NHSRC. He's also a visiting faculty and an external examiner for BSc and MSc Medical Informatics, Mahatma Gandhi University, Medical Sciences and Technology, Jaipur. He's also a member of Telemedicine Society of India, International Society of Telemedicine and E-Health, Academy of Hospital Administration, AHA, Noida. He's also the member of National Task Force Swachh Bharat. He's been having a multiple roles. He's heading on as a chairman and also as a convener of Subcommittee of Telemedicine Standards, Health Informatics Section Committee, and also from BIS. Health Informatics Section Committee, BIS, has been very much launched under his guidance. Is also the member advisory committee of Health Sector Skills Council in World Bank projects and training needs for allied health sciences. He is the member of Telehealth Advisory Committee and the domain expert. The Telemedicine Society of India, under his able guidance, has also been launched under Tata Foundation Initiative for Entrepreneurs and Innovators. And he's been also involved in the QAI for the Technical Committee and Accreditation of Telehealth areas. Sir has been having a versatile and a dynamic person, and he's been very pragmatic in his approach. The man of words who has turned these things into action. Sir, the virtual stage is yours. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rupashri, for those kind words about me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, I just have a small request from everybody. I wish to request you all to remember all those who have lost their lives or continue to battle the terrible scourge that has befallen the entire humanity. Let us pray for them. Let us also pray for the COVID warriors, like the doctors, paramedical workers, police, sanitation staff, and many others who are on the front line. Sarve Santu Niramaya. Let all be free from disease and infirmity. I would like to share my screen. Okay. So good morning once again. I bring you greetings from the Telemedicine Society of India, which is popularly known as the Telemedicine, the TSI globally. At the outset, I wish to thank the organizers of SimHealth 2021 for inviting me to deliver this lecture. I'm greatly honored and humbled to be able to interact with the enlightened audience on this momentous occasion. Thank you indeed. Despite my many affiliations, I do not have any conflicts of interest, as most of them are non-remunerative, except for the honorariums I receive from the government agencies. I will be talking to you today about telemedicine and the new normal and the opportunities and challenges for telemedicine in the COVID pandemic. This is the scheme of my talk. However, please do bear with me if I tend to ramble, as the topic is so vast and my passion for it is unbound. I wish to take a few minutes to introduce the Telemedicine Society of India to you all. TSI is a not-for-profit scientific society dedicated to creating awareness of telemedicine at national level and carrying out scientific activities to promote telemedicine, with its headquarters at the Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute, Lucknow, at the School of Telemedicine and Biomedical Informatics, which is a government-approved National Resource Center for Telehealth. TSI functions with the avowed aim to promote and encourage development, advancement, and research in telemedicine technology and its associated fields. We have almost 900 members with 11 state chapters and 3 more in the pipeline. The Government of India recognizes TSI as a lead organization promoting telehealth in India. TSI aims to establish a pan-India telehealth network to facilitate delivery of healthcare by online teleconsultations. TSI has the mandate to train healthcare providers to utilize telemedicine technology in bridging the healthcare divide. To this end, we have developed an online training program for using telehealth technology for healthcare professionals, with a certificate to be awarded at the successful culmination of the training. The training will ensure that all those who are trained will learn to function in conformity with the government's telemedicine practice guidelines, as well as ensuring the privacy and security aspects of patients' data. There were 35 training sessions that were conducted in 6 months from April to September 2020. Majority were offered free, that is 28 of the 35 sessions, and a small number were paid for by, there were sponsored sessions. 3,946 candidates took the course. Total time spent for delivery of the course by the faculty was 142 hours. 4 sessions were also undertaken free of cost to train almost 350 Armed Forces Medical Services officers and specialists. The training course was the first of its kind in India and was received enthusiastically by all the doctors who came from different specialities. The level of knowledge on telemedicine was variable, and most had some basic understanding of the subject. Further modules that we are proposing to develop in future would cover common medical specialties that use telemedicine, along with a few topics of general interest to include diabetes, cardiology, psychiatry, pediatrics, obs and gynae, dermatology, radiology, pathology, home healthcare, ICU protocols, recent advances and future of telemedicine, legal cases in telemedicine, and standards for protocols, software, and hardware. This is a snapshot of one of our sessions which we conducted for the Armed Forces Medical Officers a little while back. A letter of appreciation by Lieutenant General Madhuri Kanitkar, who is the Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, the highest ranking lady officer in the entire armed forces. And they stated that the webinar was conducted in detail regarding telemedicine. It gave a holistic view on telemedicine, which was educative, keeping in mind the recent challenges. There was immense clarity with respect to conduct of telemedicine and its legal implications. This is pictorial of the National Resource Center at the SGPGI Lucknow at the School of Telemedicine and Biomedical Informatics. Another one of the NRC with the e-tumor board decision support system and process. The training was, just a moment. So as I take you through how digital health or telehealth has been at the forefront of the COVID-19 response and the role it is expected to play in the future, it is pertinent to note that by the year 2025, digital health, in particular telehealth, the market in India is expected to grow up to $5.5 billion. And the Asia Pacific market is to grow up to $22.5 billion. So there is an immense ROI as far as telehealth in the region is concerned. We have to keep in perspective that governments across the region are creating a supportive regulatory environment for digital health with focus on telehealth. India notified its own telemedicine practice guidelines in March 2020 and launched the ambitious National Digital Health Mission in August 2020. So there is a lot of activity that is happening on the digital health context. And our focus today is primarily how digital health solutions have helped in healthcare delivery systems, as well as in public health response in the context of the pandemic. We are all aware that several countries have introduced several mobile-based interventions for COVID-19, but that's just one part of it. For the pandemic response itself, there are several digital health interventions that have been launched. We are also aware that the strict measures to prevent transmission of COVID-19 have resulted in almost a shutdown of healthcare establishments and care delivery. And this requires the digital health interventions to scale up and be available to provide a virtual environment in which the continuum of care was to be delivered. This is both in the context of COVID as well as for non-COVID conditions, as I will explain a little later in the discussion. So what happens to somebody who has diabetes or hypertension or chronic conditions such as osteoarthritis, and if they were not able to go in to the hospitals for the next couple of months? What happens to them? Do digital platforms have a role to play? Or is it just teleconsultation? Or is it something more comprehensive that we're talking about? Patients largely have become very, very aware Not that they were not aware before, but the pandemic has really enhanced the vision and the scope of digital platforms to end users and citizens at large, and particularly those who have either been affected with COVID 19, their immediate relatives, or people with non COVID conditions who had to seek care, and a mechanism by which they could continue to avail care when everything else was shut down. So it is anticipated that about 50% of patients in India, as well as in the Asia Pacific region, will accept that healthcare delivery systems will majorly depend on digital delivery models in the next couple of years. So here is a quote from one of the people that we interacted in rural Uttar Pradesh. And this is what he said, though it was in local colloquial language in Hindi, I've translated it into English. If it was so easy to understand over a telephone call whether I have COVID or not, and then to actually get tested by booking a test through a missed call service, and when tested positive, being monitored through a phone at home. So why was this not being done earlier? None of this is rocket science, right? But it took us a pandemic to realize that we can use simple tools to actually deliver comprehensive care, even in the context of something as infectious as COVID 19. So, what COVID 19 has done is that it disrupted the continuum of care for non COVID conditions. It also created a whole lot of panic amongst people who are at risk of being infected. Also, with these are people with chronic conditions or with non communicable diseases, those with diabetes and other comorbidities. So, there was absolutely no focused attention towards this as part of the pandemic response in the early days. And that is where lies an opportunity for telehealth. So, if somebody gets a complication that is related to their ongoing medical conditions, what do? Healthcare establishments are telling, don't come here. And all of the public health response is geared towards contact tracing and finding who are at risk and testing them and response to that testing. So what did the government do in the context of COVID pandemic? Well, the Indian government introduced several digital tools, and they also ramped up the telehealth capacity. Of particular note is the government-sponsored application eSanjeevani. More about it later in the course of the talk. So here we are, in the midst of a global pandemic that, as per all informed sources, is likely to last for a significant length of time. It will impact the way we all live in the future, and this, in all probability, will be the new normal. Even though the much-awaited vaccine is here, and many are in the offing, but there is news of the temporary efficacy of the vaccines to afford protection from the infection and emergence of new strains of the virus that are possibly more virulent than the original one. So the battle goes on. And the tried and tested practice of social distancing that has proved to be the linchpin of the fight against COVID 19 infection will continue to be the number one strategy. Meaning thereby, social distancing in the form we all know it will have to be continued across the entire paradigm of healthcare delivery, lest both the care seekers and care providers fall prey to the virus. During the current pandemic, telehealth has emerged as an effective and sustainable solution for precaution, prevention, and treatment to stem the spread of COVID 19. Telemedicine is such a perfect ready-made solution to addressing healthcare needs during the pandemic and thereafter that it wouldn't make sense not to use it. Telehealth bridging the gap between people, physicians, and health systems, enabling everyone, especially symptomatic patients, to stay at home and communicate with physicians through virtual channels, helping to reduce the spread of virus to mass populations and the medical staff on the front lines. So I see three primary roles for telehealth technologies during this crisis from the healthcare provider's perspective. The first is simple: to screen patients remotely rather than having them visit the hospital. Telemedicine can be used to triage patients with cold and flu-like symptoms and to remotely care for those who don't need medical intervention or could receive care at home. By keeping potentially infected individuals out of hospitals and doctors' offices, the healthcare system can lower the risk of transmission to other patients and the healthcare staff. The second role for telemedicine during the pandemic is often overlooked to help provide routine care for those during antenatal care and patients with chronic diseases like diabetes, ischemic heart disease, hypertension, and cancer therapy who are at high risk if exposed to the virus. COVID-19 can be very harmful and even fatal for people with compromised health. By using teleconsultations, physicians can help these patients avoid coronavirus exposure. The third and very significant role is that providers and their staff are not immune to infection and are at an increased risk for contracting COVID-19 due to their continuous exposure to infected patients. Once tested and confirmed, these providers will be quarantined and become unavailable to the healthcare system just when it needs them the most. With telehealth technologies in place, quarantine providers have the option to continue seeing patients via remote feeds. Now, this is about eSanjeevani application, which the government of India, as a part of its Ayushman Bharat scheme, has launched the national teleconsultation service in two variants. eSanjeevani, Ayushman Bharat Health and Wellness Centers, that is the doctor to doctor, and eSanjeevani OPD, which is patient to doctor, which is a stay-at-home OPD. This is available across 26 states. I've given you the helpline numbers on the slide, as well as the email. The eSanjeevani OPD is presently hosting 26 general OPDs and 190 specialties and super specialty OPDs. More than 11.5 lakh consultations have taken place, and many more continue to do so as we speak. eSanjeevani has been made by the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, Mohali, and the same application with suitable modifications have been developed for the Armed Forces Medical Services under aegis of the DCIDS Med by the name of SEHAT, which is an acronym that stands for Services, E-Health Assistance and Teleconsultation. The government of India has a project for home care for quarantined COVID patients, which has been implemented on a public-private partnership mode with private agencies like Portia Medical, utilizing telemedicine technology to monitor and mentor patients under quarantine and to provide home-based care, periodic visits by nurses, and monitoring by doctors. Private hospitals like Apollo, Max, Fortis are also providing home care packages on similar lines for COVID and non-COVID patients. Now, a bit about the benefits and opportunities in the use of telehealth. It saves on healthcare costs. The US spends $3.6 trillion on healthcare every year, much of it when care seekers visit healthcare facilities. However, 25% of these costs are avoidable with telehealth, and that's a massive, massive figure. It extends across access to consults from specialists despite their location. It increases the patient engagement by allowing patients to connect with the doctors more frequently and thus strengthening the patient-doctor relationship and empowering patients to manage their own care. It entails better quality patient care by facilitating remote, extensive monitoring of the patients. Some of the opportunities are that it facilitates public health mitigation strategies by increasing social distancing, thus reducing potential infectious exposures. It enables teletriage, decreasing the volume of patients seeking care in facilities, thus reducing the strain on healthcare systems. It reduces the use of PPE by healthcare providers, maintains continuity of care, which can avoid additional negative consequences from delayed preventive, chronic, or routine care. Remote access can also help preserve the patient-provider relationship at times when an in-person visit is not practical or feasible. It enables monitoring of contacts of asymptomatic patients in home quarantine or high-risk non-COVID patients with conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, heart failure, and those on dialysis or cancer patients. It enables integrating the infected healthcare workers to provide teleconsultations from home quarantine. The elderly are taking up teleconsultations with great enthusiasm of late. Ease of consulting with RMPs, not having to leave home, no risk of infection from others, no risk of social stigma associated with COVID infection. So healthcare providers and corporate hospitals are offering home care packages with remote monitoring. Well, when there are benefits and opportunities, there are challenges as well. There is lack of patient awareness that they have the option of consulting with their physicians via the internet. Not everybody knows the benefits of telehealth and that the actual telehealth services are available. Several medical professional associations consider advances in technologies an existential threat or something akin to snake oil, depending on the limited understanding. But this can be overcome through orientation and use of digital health tools as part of the training curriculum. There is a possibility of communication and device breakdown. There are legal issues like the regulatory and licensure issues. The telemedicine practice guidelines issued by the government in March 22, however, raised many issues which persist and they need a review. Interstate and international licensure challenges and other regulatory issues may vary from state to state. The current non-availability of financial reimbursement mechanisms for remote care delivery and ambiguity around insurance compliance and insurer reticence, that is the and as a result, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India, the IRDAI, has directed the insurance providers to consider teleconsult for reimbursement. One of the insurance companies, the Star Health, Star Insurance Company, has taken the lead role in this. IRDAI has asked insurers to include telemedicine under health insurance policy. Decision is expected to help many insurance policyholders who had to visit doctors. Telemedicine is usually considered as an out-of-pocket expense, and as a result, healthcare providers and patients need to communicate with insurers to understand availability of the coverage of telehealth, telemedicine, or healthcare advice line services. As regards breach of privacy and security of patient data, personal data privacy and security issues exist in the absence of robust data security mechanisms. Lack of embedded security systems give rise to vulnerability and prevent decoupling of personal health information. The Personal Data Protection Bill is expected to address most issues in the near future. Limited access to technological devices in rural and outreach areas. There are challenges around ownership of mobile phones, for example, smartphone, a tablet, or a computer, which are needed for a telehealth visit or connectivity issues, as well as functional literacy required for a self-initiated teleconsultation, coupled with lack of understanding on part of patients with regard to the technology involved. Facilitated access to smart communication technology devices in the outreach is a solution where ASHA workers or the ANMs carry smart devices, as is happening in a number of states, like Uttar Pradesh has taken an initiative in this, Rajasthan is doing it, and it is also happening in Chhattisgarh, as far as I know. Healthcare facilities are not yet equipped infrastructurally to deliver care via telemedicine. Many large hospitals are racing to implement and scale up those capabilities at the front lines. More and more doctors are implementing telehealth facilities in their offices. Lack of monitoring devices at patient end may result in wrong diagnosis or hampered treatment. Then there are training issues as well, pertaining to the level of comfort with technology for both healthcare providers and patients. There is a learning curve on part of both caregivers and care seekers to using telemedicine in the traditional provider patient relationship. There is a need for training of both healthcare providers and patients to understand the protocols involved in teleconsultation. Doctors need to notify patients that office visits may be replaced by telemedicine consults. They need to train providers to use the tools, revise scheduling processes, determine triage procedures, review third-party payer telehealth policies, and to establish billing practices. Lack of knowledge and adherence to regulations can give rise to litigations against the practitioners. Now, when a technology becomes popular or become readily available, due to its popularity, a lot of people climb onto the bandwagon. So the development, there is a need for telemedicine standards. The development of standards for telemedicine is an important and valuable process to help ensure effective and safe delivery of quality healthcare. Creation of standards is important to payers and regulators as well, as they are increasingly adopting and integrating them into regulations and policies. The sudden rapid proliferation of telemedicine companies and the array of products and services necessitates a national standardized means of assuring quality, patient safety, and competent care. Until now, the telemedicine industry has not had an easy to identify confirmation or seal of approval of quality from an independent third party organization. In this case, accreditation also helps fill the regulatory gap that occurs when the pace of innovation may move faster than regulations can keep up, as with telemedicine. Accredited organizations will help to demonstrate to their various stakeholders that their processes and procedures promote better clinical and financial outcomes, including patient safety. In addition, having the right seal of approval is a differentiator in a crowded field, and accredited organizations should be able to capture increased market share. Now, I would like to develop a little bit upon key sites from the telehealth interventions for COVID pandemic. This was a report that the Telemedicine Society of India had commissioned along with a company called Practo, which is an online healthcare aggregator. So some of the key insights are as depicted on the slide. The physical appointments went down by 32% when we reinvented healthcare delivery with telemedicine during the COVID-19 pandemic. The visits to secondary care specialties like neurosurgery, somnologists, cardiologists, and oncologists, it grew dramatically. There was a 3% increase in the number of people using online consultations. 26% of the consultations were with the general physicians, followed by dermatology, which are 20%, gynecology, and others like gastroenterology, ENT, pediatrics, so 7% each. The fastest growing health concerns included ophthalmology, ENT, orthopedics, pediatrics, and gastroenterology. Delhi, Mumbai, and Chennai saw an average of 16% growth in queries of ENT specialization. Non-metros saw the highest growth of 7 times in online consultations as compared to the same period in the previous year. During the same period last year, the split between metro and non-metro consultations stood at 75 to 25. This year, it has been increased in favor of teleconsultations to 60-40. demonstrating that the number of consultations from non-metro cities is on the rise. Tier 2 cities like Manjeri, Ara, Balasore, Eta, Orai, Khopoli, Jakta, and Sripuri used telemedicine for the very first time in this time period. Cities like Meerut, Jammu, Srinagar, Nellore, Kochi, and other similar cities recorded a 10-time growth. Amongst the metros, Chennai witnessed the highest growth of 4 times as compared to the previous year. Bengaluru, Delhi NCR, Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad, and Calcutta grew by more than 300% as compared to last year. More and more elderly people are now getting used to technology. There was a 502% spike in online consultations from people above the age of 50 during this crisis, who contributed to 12% of the overall consultations as compared to just 5% of the previous year. More women are going online. Last year, the men-women ratio stood at 75-25, while this year it is 68-32. Gynecologists and general physicians were 2 of the most consulted specialties by women in 2020. Online mental health consultations and queries continued to rise during the period. There was a 302% increase in overall mental health related queries. Women contributed to 33% of overall queries for mental health specialties. There were more consultations at late hours. 25% of consultations were recorded between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. when people are not burdened with the work responsibilities. One of the top specialties consulted during late night hours was psychiatry. Preferred days to consult doctors online were Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, while Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays were preferred for in-person appointments. So we could not find a reason for this finding. At the end of my talk, as is my habit, I would like to end on a note of caution. Telemedicine, though, is a wonderful technology, but it at best is an enabler for good clinical practice. It is not a total substitute. Jai Hind.
With utmost humility, thank you very much, sir, for your deliberation. I would like to take few of the questions from the students who have given me on the chat box. One of the students, Namisha, has written down telling telemedicine is definitely a requirement of today's time, but how can it replace a brick and a mortar setup which helps physical examination of the patient?
Yes, a very good question. Look, telemedicine does not profess or claim to replace actual brick and mortar institutional practice of healthcare. You see, telehealth is an enabler, like what we in the armed forces call, it is a force multiplier. Okay, so where the normal traditional healthcare services are not available, like in the hinterlands, in the out of reach, the underserved areas, the out of reach areas, those are the places that would benefit the maximum, the most with the telehealth technology. And ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, which has been working hand in hand with the Telemedicine Society of India since almost 25 years now, has been doing a human service by providing satellite connectivity. And now what with the fiber connectivity also increasing its space under the Ministry of IT and Telecommunications, these things are likely to percolate to the hinterlands also. But no, it does not, telehealth does not claim to replace the traditional healthcare practice. It is at best, as I said, an enabler, not a replacement.
So one more question. How do we obtain consent before initiation of teleconsultation?
Yes, a very important question and a very pertinent one for those who are practicing telehealth teleconsultation. You see, there are various modes of consultation on a telehealth network. So quite often what happens is the patient seeks a consultation from a care provider. Now, the very act of seeking teleconsultation, it means there is implied consent. There is already a consent on part of the care seeker that yes, he or she is seeking care over the telehealth network, and that is implied. In other cases, in any case, we always instruct and we always train the doctors who are indulging in telehealth practices, even though it may be an implied consent, but there are forms, there are formats available which are a part of the integral part of the telemedicine practice guidelines, that they should take proper consent from the patient, even though it is on the by mail or WhatsApp or whatever with the medium, and that should be kept as a record. So there should be an effort by the care provider to seek what is known as explicit consent as well. However, if the consultation is sought by the care seeker, it is already implied. So legally, the telehealth providers are safe.
Sir, I have a series of questions. Sorry, I might look. There are three things I want to know from administration and management perspective. One is the operational aspects. When we healthcare professionals as students who are there, my 455 students would like to know what are the operational challenges we face in teleconsultation point after commissioning. Second question is in relation to the quality. Now you say about the standardization of quality. Now about the best practices and also on the benchmarking probability, what is that we are looking at in telemedicine and teleconsultation in quality perspective. The third thing is about this ROI, the return on investment. You have been telling about the digital area 2025, it is going to be 5.5 billion. In a strategic way, how can we achieve this? So three questions, very shortly, kindly for the paucity of time. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I will take them on one by one. Your first query about the operational aspects of the teleconsult. Now, well, you see, if you see the telemedicine practice guidelines, which were issued by the then Medical Council of India and Niti Aayog, in the drafting of which I and a couple of my other colleagues had a major hand. So that gives you the entire procedure, whereby it will be very lengthy to explain in this time due to paucity of time. So the entire procedure is delineated over there. You need to have some kind of a medium, some kind of infrastructure, both at the patient end as well as the both at the caregiver and the care seeker end. There has to be a medium of communication which should be robust. The bandwidth should be adequate because there are issues of communication breakdown, connectivity breakdown, and it is always better to have video consultation rather than merely an audio consultation. There has to be an exchange of alphanumeric data, even pictorial data, like for example the images of the investigations and the other other data. So those things have to be ensured, and so complete guidelines are given. As I mentioned, that I'm chairing a subcommittee with the Bureau of Indian Standards on drafting the telehealth norms. We follow the International Standards Organization, the ISO standards, and we work in conformity with the ISO. And so those standards would be available, and those are the standards which would define what are the operational standards, what are the infrastructure standards, what are the HR standards, what are the training standards, and so on and so forth. Also, as I mentioned, that Telemedicine Society of India is conducting a comprehensive training program for the registered medical practitioners who are indulging in telehealth practice, and this is also mandated in the telemedicine practice guidelines. All those who profess to practice telehealth in India are to have been trained and certified in the practice of telehealth within 3 years of issuance of the telemedicine practice guidelines. So that is a very important aspect of the training and the operational aspects and the legal aspects of the practice of telehealth. So, and as far as quality is concerned, I think I partially addressed this issue that we are at the moment, there are no such structured guidelines available in India, though the American Telemedicine Association has got guidelines for almost every aspect of telemedicine practice. But we in India have now started on embarked upon the journey to identify these guidelines, and which should be available shortly to the public at large. Now, your last question about the return of investment. Yes. So no doubt, because you see what has happened is with the issuance of the telemedicine practice guidelines in March last, also the fact that the COVID pandemic has forced us to remain in a lockdown manner, and this is likely to be the normal way of functioning for some time to come. There are people who predict that possibly for the next 2 to 3 years, or maybe even more, there may be many waves. I don't want to be a doomsday prophet, but this is possibly likely to change the entire paradigm of healthcare delivery in India or elsewhere for that matter. We are seeing the similar trends globally for that matter. So there are a lot of people like aggregators of telehealth. There are providers of investigations. The corporate hospitals getting onto it. There are home care services which are getting onto the act. So there are a whole lot of various diverse sections of healthcare providers who are now indulging in telehealth practice. And yes, those estimates may be very conservative. The ROI may be much more than what is actually predicted. I hope that answers your question too a little bit.
Thank you so much, sir. It was wonderful discussing about this digital health solutions, and I really thank wholeheartedly for this particular session which you have given in relation to Pan India Network, and I hope entire students will be benefited from this. I would like to thank you personally and also on this professional front.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful interacting with all of you, and a privilege for me indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goel, once again. And thank you, Dr. Roopasree, for being such a brilliant host.